The baby had been crying for 43 minutes. Not the soft fussing that passengers could drown out with noise-canceling headphones or strategic volumes of wine. This was the kind of raw, desperate crying that crawled under skin and took up residence in the chest. The kind that made strangers shift in their seats and check their watches and wonder how much longer until landing. First-class passengers glanced up from their champagne and tablets, irritation flickering across their faces. Then they saw who was holding the child. Then they looked away. Kang Joon-seok sat by the window like a blade waiting to be drawn. His posture was architectural, spine straight, shoulders square, every line of his body controlled with the precision of a man who understood that power lived in stillness. The charcoal chiton suit fit him like a second skin, untouched by a single wrinkle despite the thrashing infant pressed against his chest. His black hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they absorbed light rather than reflected it. A gold Patek Philippe caught the cabin light every time the baby flailed. But nothing about him said father. Everything about him said apex predator. 2 rows ahead, a man in a Tom Ford suit pretended to read The Economist. 1 row back, another man scrolled through his phone with the focused disinterest of someone paid to look like he wasn't watching. Both wore the same understated black, both moved with the same coiled readiness. No one complained about the crying. Not on a flight where silence followed Kang Joon-seok like a second shadow. The baby's cries grew hoarser, weaker. Joon-seok adjusted his grip, his large, scarred hands awkward against the fragile body that seemed determined to arch away from him. He had negotiated ceasefires between families that had been killing each other for 3 generations. He had watched his own father die without flinching. He had made choices that required him to sleep with a gun under his pillow and a knife strapped to his ankle. But this 17-pound human who refused every bottle, every pacifier, every attempt at comfort. This he could not control. Wayan Miamchwo, he muttered in Korean, his voice low and rough. Why won't you stop? The nanny had prepared the formula exactly to specification. The pediatrician had approved the brand. The temperature had been tested. Everything had been done correctly, the way Joon-seok did everything, with precision, with control, with the absolute certainty that perfection was simply a matter of eliminating variables. Still his son screamed. If you're already hooked by this impossible situation, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next will completely shatter everything you think you know about power, mercy, and the unbreakable bonds that form in the most unexpected places. This story is about a mafia boss who ruled through fear, a grieving mother carrying an impossible gift, and the moment when milk became more dangerous than blood. Over the next 9 chapters, you'll witness a choice that will cost everything, a bond that will start a war, and a love that will dismantle an empire. Subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of this journey. Hit the like button if you're already emotionally invested in what happens to this crying baby. And share this video with someone who loves stories where kindness becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. Because 3 rows ahead, someone is about to stand up and offer the unthinkable. And nothing, not in Seoul, not in the underworld, not in either of their shattered lives, will ever be the same. Now let's see what happens when desperation meets mercy at 35,000 feet. 3 rows ahead, Clara Peters closed her eyes as the sound hit her like a fist. Her body betrayed her before her mind could stop it. The familiar ache bloomed in her breasts, sharp, insistent, biological. Her arms tightened reflexively around nothing. Her breath caught on the edge of something that felt too much like drowning. She pressed her lips together hard enough to hurt. Fighting the wave of grief that rose like a tide she'd learned to hold back, but never quite escape. 8 months. 8 months since she'd buried her son in a plot so small it hadn't seemed real. 8 months since the world had divided itself into before and after. And she'd been left stranded in the after with no map back to who she used to be. Clara hadn't planned to be on this flight. She hadn't planned to be anywhere, really. The grief counselor, a kind woman with sad eyes and a too gentle voice, had suggested travel, distance, breathing room, as if grief respected geography, as if you could fly far enough to outrun the ghost of a child who would never grow up. Seoul had been random, a cousin's wedding, an excuse that required no explanation, a chance to be somewhere her loss didn't hang in every room like wallpaper. But grief didn't care about time zones. The baby cried again, a sound so desperate it didn't seem human. Clara opened her eyes. She turned slowly in her seat, and that was when she saw him. The man holding the baby looked like violence wearing a suit. Tattoos climbed his neck in elegant black lines, disappearing beneath his collar like secrets he wore openly because no one would dare ask. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. And his eyes kept flicking down to the infant with something that looked dangerously close to panic. But the baby wasn't just crying. He was searching. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen this before, in the NICU where she used to work. Before. The way newborns rooted instinctively, turning toward warmth and heartbeat, and the promise of something their bodies knew they needed even if they couldn't name it. This baby wasn't crying because he was in pain. He was crying because he was lost. Clara stood before she could talk herself out of it. The movement was instinct, nurse training overriding grief, professional knowledge trumping self-preservation. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, but she forced herself forward into the aisle. The flight attendant appeared instantly, her expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am is everything." "I'm a pediatric nurse," Clara said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. She didn't add that she hadn't worked since Marcus died. Didn't mention that she'd surrendered her badge and walked out of Children's Hospital 8 months ago and hadn't been back. "That baby needs help." The attendant's eyes darted toward the source of the crying, then back to Clara. "The passenger has been very firm about not wanting assistance." "I understand." Clara's heart was hammering now, adrenaline cutting through grief like light through fog. "But if you don't intervene, that baby is going to exhaust himself into something worse than crying." It was the clinical tone that did it, the nurse voice that brooked no argument. They walked together down the aisle. With each step, Clara's awareness sharpened. She catalogued details the way she used to in the NICU. The baby's color, flushed but not cyanotic, his movement strong, vigorous, his cry, desperate but not weak. Professional, clinical, safe. Until she looked up and met Kang Joon-seok's eyes. The impact was physical. His gaze locked onto her like a weapon finding its target, dark, absolute, assessing. In that single look, Clara understood 3 things with perfect clarity. This man was dangerous. This man was desperate. This man would kill to protect the child in his arms. Yes, the word was silk wrapped around steel, his English precise despite the accent that softened his vowels. Clara swallowed, found her voice. "Your son needs something the bottle can't give him." His jaw tightened. "We have tried everything." "I know," Clara said softly. "That's why it isn't working." Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. The baby whimpered, a broken sound that made Clara's breasts ache with sympathy let down. Her body was responding, preparing, remembering, and she knew with sudden crystal clarity what she was about to offer. What she had to offer. The only thing that might help. "I can feed him." The words dropped into the cabin like stones into still water. One of the bodyguards shifted. The flight attendant inhaled sharply. And Kang Joon-seok went absolutely, perfectly still. The kind of stillness that preceded either salvation or slaughter. "You are." His voice was careful now, each word measured. "Offering what I think you are offering." Clara nodded once. Her throat felt tight. "I lost my baby 8 months ago. My body didn't get the message." She forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every survival instinct screamed at her to look away. "I'm still producing. And your son? He needs comfort more than nutrition right now. Something human. Something real." For the first time since the plane had taken off, Kang Joon-seok looked like a man standing at the edge of something he could not dominate through will or violence or money. The baby let out another broken cry, weaker now, exhausted. That decided it. "Private cabin." His voice was abrupt, commanding. "Now." As the flight attendant led them toward the privacy of the first-class sleeping quarters, Clara felt the weight of every eye in the cabin following them. She didn't know that in making this choice, in offering the most intimate gift one woman could give to a stranger's child, she had just stepped into a world where milk was more than nourishment, where feeding an heir was claiming a bond, where mercy would be mistaken for ambition. where kindness would be weaponized, and where a simple act of compassion was about to detonate a war that would span 2 continents and cost more than she could imagine. But first, there was a baby who needed to stop crying, and a woman who needed to be needed. Everything else would come after. The bodyguard moved first. He stepped into Clara's path with the fluid economy of someone trained to neutralize threats before they materialized. His hand didn't reach for a weapon, didn't need to. The message was clear in the wall of his body. Proceed at your own risk. Mignon. Joon-seok's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. One word. A name that sounded like a command. The bodyguard stepped aside. But his eyes never left Clara. The private sleeping cabin was smaller than she'd expected, designed for rest, not intimacy. A narrow bed bolted to the wall. Soft lighting that did nothing to soften the sharp angles of Joon-seok's face as he followed her inside. The baby's cries had weakened to exhausted whimpers, each one sounding more broken than the last. The flight attendant hovered at the threshold, uncertain. Sir, I should stay too. Out. Joon-seok didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The door closed with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud. They were alone. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat. The cabin felt smaller now, the air thicker. She forced herself to focus on the baby, on the small, red face pressed against expensive fabric, on the tiny body that trembled with each diminishing cry. Professional. Clinical. Safe. I'll need you to sit, she said quietly, gesturing to the bed. Her voice didn't shake. That was something. And I'll need privacy too. I stay. His tone left no room for negotiation. If this is a trick. A trick? Clara's eyes snapped to his. You think I'm what? Planning to hurt your child while you're in the same room? With bodyguards outside. I think, Joon-seok said carefully, that I don't know you. That you approached me. That in my world, kindness is the sharpest knife. The words landed like stones. Clara understood then what she'd walked into. This wasn't just a father with a crying baby. This was a man for whom trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. A man who had probably watched allies become enemies over less than the gift she was offering. My name is Clara Peters, she said softly. I'm a pediatric nurse from Atlanta. I lost my son Marcus to SIDS 8 months ago. Her voice cracked on his name. It always did. I came to Seoul for my cousin's wedding, because I needed to be somewhere that didn't remind me of him every second of every day. She paused, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I'm not here to hurt your baby. I'm here because mine is dead, and I can't save him, but maybe, her breath hitched. Maybe I can help yours. Silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Joon-seok studied her face with the intensity of a man who read lies the way others read books. Looking for the tell, the crack in the facade, the angle she was working. He found only grief. The baby whimpered again, the sound threat and desperate. If you hurt him, Joon-seok said quietly, there is no place on this earth where you would be safe from me. I know, Clara whispered. He sat. The bed creaked slightly under his weight. He held his son with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the threat still hanging in the air, as if the child was made of porcelain and might shatter at the wrong touch. Clara moved carefully, sitting beside them but not too close. Her hands trembled slightly as she unbuttoned the top of her blouse, her fingers clumsy with nervousness and muscle memory both. She didn't look at Joon-seok. Couldn't. Turn your head, she said softly. No. Then at least, she stopped. There was no point. This man would watch because in his world, turning away meant vulnerability, meant trust he couldn't afford to give. Clara reached for the baby. For a moment, she thought Joon-seok might refuse. His arms tightened fractionally, every instinct screaming at him not to surrender his child to a stranger. But then the baby let out another broken cry, and something in him crumbled. He placed his son in her arms. The weight was familiar and devastating all at once. Clara's body responded instantly. The letdown reflex triggered by proximity and instinct, and 8 months of grief that had never quite found an outlet. She positioned the baby carefully, supporting his head with practiced ease. The first latch was instinctive. The silence that followed was profound. The baby's entire body seemed to melt into her, tension draining away as he found what he'd been searching for. His small hand curled against her skin, starfish fingers pressing into softness. His eyes, dark like his father's, fluttered closed. Peace. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks unchecked. This was Marcus. This was every baby she'd held in the NICU. This was the ghost of motherhood that still haunted her body despite having no child to feed. Across from her, Kang Joon-seok sat frozen. He had killed men. Had ordered deaths with less thought than most people gave to dinner reservations. Had built an empire on violence and fear, and the absolute certainty that weakness was death. But the sight of his son, finally at peace, unmade him. The door to the cabin was closed. There was no going back now. For any of them. The silence was sacred. Clara had forgotten what it felt like. This particular quiet that came after chaos. Not empty silence, but the weighted kind. The kind that held sleeping breath and steady heartbeat, and the soft snuffling sounds of an infant finally at peace. The baby's hand had gone slack against her skin, fingers uncurling like a flower opening. His breathing had deepened, settled. The desperate tension that had held his small body rigid had melted away, until he was nothing but warm weight and trust. Clara looked down at him, and felt something crack open in her chest. She'd forgotten this too. The way newborns smelled, milk sweet and powder soft. The weight of a sleeping infant, heavy with the boneless surrender that only came with complete security. The way their eyelashes looked against their cheeks, impossibly long and delicate. Marcus had looked like this once. Before he'd stopped breathing. Before the world had divided itself into before and after, and she'd been left stranded in the after with arms that ached to hold what no longer existed. A tear dropped onto the baby's forehead. Clara wiped it away quickly, her thumb gentle against downy skin. She couldn't fall apart. Not here. Not in front of this dangerous man who'd threatened to hunt her across continents if she harmed his child. But God, it hurt. It hurt to feel useful again. To feel needed. To have her body do what it was designed for after 8 months of producing milk for a ghost. Across from her, Joon-seok hadn't moved. He sat like a statue carved from obsidian. Absolutely still, barely breathing. His eyes were fixed on his son with an intensity that made Clara's skin prickle. She'd seen grief before. Had worn it like a second skin for 8 months. But this was different. This was a man watching a miracle he didn't believe in. He's asleep, Clara whispered. The words seemed to break whatever spell held him. Joon-seok's eyes snapped to hers, and Clara saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not gratitude. Not relief. Fear. How long will he? His voice was rough and used. He cleared his throat. How long will this last? Clara looked down at the sleeping infant. A few hours, maybe. Long enough for you to land at least. She paused. But he'll need to feed again. Babies this young need to eat every 2 to 3 hours. And the formula? Might work better now that he's not desperate, Clara said carefully. Sometimes babies just need to feel safe first. To remember what comfort feels like. She didn't say what they both knew. That the baby had been looking for his mother. That no amount of correct temperature or approved formula could replace the primal recognition of human warmth and heartbeat, and milk that tasted like love. Silence stretched between them again. Clara shifted, preparing to hand the baby back. The movement made her wince. Her breasts were tender, oversensitive from months of unused production finally finding purpose. She'd need to nurse again soon or face the painful engorgement that came with interrupted supply. But that was tomorrow's problem. I should give him back to you, she said softly. Joon-seok reached for his son with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Clara noticed. Filed it away. This man who ruled through fear and violence was terrified of the small human in her arms. The transfer was careful, reverent. Clara supported the baby's head until Joon-seok had him secure, watching to make sure his grip was right. The baby stirred slightly, made a small sound, then settled against his father's chest without waking. He trusts you now, Clara said quietly. It was meant to be comforting. A reassurance that the bond between father and son would strengthen. But Joon-seok's jaw tightened, and Clara realized with sudden clarity that she'd said something dangerous. In my world, he said slowly, his eyes still on his sleeping son, there is a saying. He paused, and when he spoke again his accent thickened slightly, as if the words carried weight that English couldn't properly hold. Jeot meoko al meoko. Those who share milk share blood. Clara's breath caught. You fed my heir, Joon-seok continued, his voice barely above a whisper. In the eyes of my family, of every family who knows what just happened, you didn't just give him comfort. He finally looked up at her, and Clara saw the warning in his eyes. You claimed him. The words dropped into the small cabin like stones into deep water. Clara opened her mouth. Closed it. I didn't, that wasn't. I know. His voice was flat. But they won't care about your intentions. Outside the cabin door, she could hear movement. Footsteps. Low voices speaking rapid Korean. The baby slept on, oblivious to the fact that his mother's milk had just bound him to a stranger. That his father's world operated by rules Clara didn't understand. That milk wasn't just nourishment. It was claim. It was bond. It was, whether she'd meant it to be or not, a declaration of protection that couldn't be taken back. And somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, in first-class cabins and business-class seats, passengers who'd witnessed a black woman disappear into private quarters with Korea's most dangerous man were already composing messages. Already spreading word. Already starting a war. Seoul swallowed them whole. Incheon International Airport at dawn was a cathedral of glass and steel. Beautiful, efficient, impersonal. Clara moved through customs in a fog of exhaustion and residual adrenaline, her body still thrumming with the aftermath of what she'd done. The baby had slept the rest of the flight. She hadn't. She'd returned to her seat while Joon-seok disappeared through a private exit, flanked by men in black who moved like shadows. No goodbye. No thank you. Just the weight of his final words echoing in her skull. You claimed him. She tried to forget. Her cousin's apartment in Gangnam was modern and empty. Jae-hae was already at the wedding venue, coordinating last-minute details. Clara unpacked mechanically, showered, tried to sleep. Failed. When she finally gave up and walked to the convenience store for coffee, she noticed the car. Black sedan. Tinted windows. Parked across the street with the engine running. She told herself she was paranoid. Jet lag. Grief. The strange intimacy of what had happened on the plane making her see threats where none existed. But when she returned an hour later, the car was still there. 40 kilometers away. In a penthouse that overlooked the Han River, Kang Joon-seok learned that privacy was a luxury he could no longer afford. 3 families know, Min-jun said, his voice carefully neutral. Maybe 4 by now. Joon-seok didn't look up from where his son slept in the bassinet beside his desk. The baby had taken the bottle that morning, grudgingly, but he'd taken it. A victory that felt hollow in light of what it had cost. How, he asked quietly. Passengers. Flight crew. Min-yoon hesitated. The first-class cabin has very rich people with very profitable connections. Tell me what they're saying. That a black woman fed your heir. Min-jun's voice was flat, reciting facts like a coroner reading autopsy results. That you allowed it. That she spent 30 minutes in a private cabin with your son. Joon-seok's jaw tightened. And the Park family wants to know if she's a concubine you're legitimizing. Min-yoon post. The Choi family thinks she's a spy you've installed as a wet nurse to secure loyalty. The Kim family. Enough. Joon-seok's voice could have cut glass. What does my uncle say? The silence was answer enough. His father's brother. The man who'd raised him after his parents died, who'd taught him that power without ruthlessness was just weakness with better marketing, would see this as he saw everything, strategically. A stranger feeding the heir wasn't kindness. It was infiltration. He's requested a meeting, Min-jun said carefully. Tonight. Joon-seok looked down at his sleeping son, and felt the familiar weight of choices that carried consequences. In his world, there were no neutral acts. Every gesture had meaning. Every kindness concealed agenda. Clara Peters had fed his child because she was grieving. But his world would read it as ambition. Double her security, he said quietly. Min-jun's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only sign of surprise he ever showed. Sir. She doesn't know what she stepped into. Joon-seok's voice was flat. But they'll come for her anyway. To punish me. To test me. To see if I'm weak enough to care about casualties. She's not one of ours. She fed my son. The words hung in the air like a verdict. That makes her ours whether she wants to be or not. Clara noticed the second car on her third day in Seoul. Different model. Same tinted windows. Same patient waiting. When she went to the wedding venue, a man in a dark suit stood near the entrance, pretending to smoke. When she took the subway to Insadong, someone followed 3 cars behind. She wasn't paranoid. She was being hunted. The knock came at midnight. Clara froze, coffee mug halfway to her lips. Jae-hai was staying at her fiancé's place. No one should know she was here. She approached the door slowly, heart hammering. Through the peephole, Kang Joon-seok, still in his suit, looking like violence barely restrained. She opened the door before fear could stop her. "You need to come with me," he said without preamble. "Excuse me." Now. His eyes scanned the hallway behind him, tracking threats she couldn't see. "You're not safe here." Clara's grip tightened on the doorframe. "I don't understand." "You fed my heir," Joon-seok said quietly, and something in his voice made her blood run cold. "In my world, that's not charity. It's claim. And every family that wants to destroy me now sees you as a weapon they can use." "I just helped a baby." "I know." His voice was almost gentle. Almost. "But they don't care about your intentions." He stepped closer, and Clara saw it clearly now. The fear beneath the control. The same terror she'd seen in the cabin when his son wouldn't stop crying. "You're a target," he said. "And the safest place for you is with me." Behind him, in the hallway shadows, she saw movement. Men. Watching. Waiting. Clara's hands started to shake. "I didn't ask for this." "Neither did my son," Joon-seok replied quietly. "But here we are." Clara went with him because the alternative was bleeding out in a hallway. Not because she wanted to. Not because she trusted him. But because the men in the shadows weren't his, and she was smart enough to recognize when survival required compromise. The car was armored. She could tell by the weight of the doors, the thickness of the glass. They drove through Seoul in silence, Clara's anger building with each kilometer. "I helped your baby," she said finally, her voice tight. "That's it. I didn't sign up for." She gestured at the convoy of vehicles surrounding them. "This." Joon-seok stared straight ahead. "I know. Do you?" Clara's hands curled into fists. "Because it feels like you've decided my life for me. Like I'm some piece you're moving around your chessboard." "You're not a piece." His voice was quiet. Dangerous. "You're a liability I'm trying to keep alive." "I didn't ask to be anyone's liability. And I didn't ask for my wife to die." The words exploded out of him like a gunshot, sharp and final. Silence crashed down between them. Joon-seok's jaw worked, muscle jumping beneath skin. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I didn't ask to be a single father. To hold my son while my wife's blood soaked the delivery room floor. To learn how to mix formula at 3 a.m. while bodyguards stood watch because even grief isn't private in my world." Clara's anger fractured. She saw it clearly now. The thing she'd missed in the cabin, the truth beneath the threats. This man wasn't angry at her. He was terrified for her. "I'm trying to protect you," he said quietly. "Even though I know you hate me for it." "I don't hate you." Clara's voice cracked. "I hate that a simple act of kindness turned into this." "Welcome to my world," Joon-seok said. "Where nothing is ever simple." The compound was a fortress disguised as a home. High walls. Security cameras. Men who moved like weapons waiting to be drawn. Clara was given a room with a view of a koi pond. Beautiful and suffocating. She lasted 4 hours before trying to leave. The attack came at the front gate. 3 men. Ski mask. One grabbed her arm before she could scream, his grip iron hard, his breath hot against her ear. "Tell your boss we can reach you anywhere." The sentence ended in a sickening crack. Joon-seok materialized like violence made flesh, his fist connecting with the man's jaw, his knee driving into another's stomach. Minjun appeared with 2 others, and the fight was over before Clara's scream finished echoing. She stood frozen, watching Joon-seok breathe hard over the broken men at his feet. Blood on his knuckles. Murder in his eyes. Then he looked at her, and the murder dissolved into something rawer. Fear. "Inside," he said hoarsely. "Now." Clara didn't move. "No." His eyes widened fractionally. "Clara." "No," she repeated, her voice stronger now despite the trembling in her legs. I won't hide. I won't be locked in a room like some princess in a tower while you fight wars I don't understand. You could have died. I've been dying for 8 months. The words tore out of her. Every day without my son is dying. Every breath I take that he doesn't is dying. So don't talk to me about death like I don't understand it intimately. Joon-seok stared at her, something breaking behind his eyes. My wife's name was Hyun, he said quietly. She loved cherry blossoms, hated violence, married me anyway, because she thought she could change me. He looked down at his bloodied hands. She was wrong. Clara's anger melted. Did she meet your son? For 17 seconds. His voice was hollow. They cleaned him, put him in her arms. She smiled. Then she was gone. Silence stretched between them. Not hostile now, but weighted with shared grief. I don't know how to do this, Joon-seok admitted. Fatherhood. Protection. Any of it. I only know how to destroy what threatens what's mine. I'm not yours, Clara said softly. You fed my son. He met her eyes. That makes you something. I don't have words for it. But something. Before Clara could respond, Min-jun appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Sir. The Park family sent a message. Joon-seok's expression shuttered closed. Show me. The tablet screen glowed with a simple demand in Korean. Hand over the woman, or we will take her. 24 hours. Clara read the words and felt ice slide down her spine. What happens in 24 hours? She asked. Joon-seok's hands curled into fists, knuckles still bleeding. War, he said simply. They're forcing me to choose. Between what? He looked at her, and Clara saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke it. Between his empire and her life. The first warehouse burned at dawn. Joon-seok watched the smoke rise from his office window, his phone vibrating with damage reports. 3 million in product. 5 men hospitalized. A message written in gasoline and flame. 16 hours left. They hit the Busan shipment, Min-jun reported, his voice tight. Intercepted the trucks. Took everything. Casualties. 2 drivers. Critical condition. Joon-seok's jaw tightened. Men who'd worked for him for years, now bleeding out because he'd refused to hand over a woman he barely knew. The intercom buzzed. Your uncle is here, the receptionist said nervously. Send him in. Kang Dae-young entered like winter. Cold, inevitable, deadly. He was smaller than his nephew, older by 30 years, but he carried authority like a weapon he'd spent decades sharpening. Gray hair. Sharp suit. Eyes that had watched empires rise and fall without blinking. Nephew. He sat without being invited. We need to discuss your situation. Joon-seok remained standing. There's nothing to discuss. 3 warehouses. 8 men injured. 2 dead. Dae-young's voice was flat. The Park family has made their position clear. The Choi family is waiting to see what you'll do. The Kim family is positioning to absorb what's left of our territory when you fall. I'm not falling. No. His uncle's eyebrow rose. You're willing to burn everything our family built for 70 years because a stranger fed your child? She saved my son. Your son is an heir, Dae-young said quietly. Not a person. He is a symbol. A vessel. And that woman has contaminated him with blood that doesn't belong. The words landed like bullets. Joon-seok's hands curled into fists. Get out. Give her to them, his uncle continued, relentless. Negotiate. They want to make an example. It will be quick. Get out. The roar echoed through the office. Dae-young stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Power without ruthlessness is just weakness with better marketing, he said. I taught you that. Your father taught me. This woman is making you weak. Then I'm weak. Joon-seok's voice was steel. But she doesn't die for my choices. His uncle paused at the door. You know what happens next. Yes. Va. Real war. Not posturing. I know. Dae-young studied him for a long moment. She must be remarkable. Then he left. Clara heard everything. The office door had been slightly open. Sound carried in the compound's hallways. She'd stood frozen, listening to them discuss her death like a business transaction. It will be quick. She found Joon-seok in the nursery an hour later, holding his sleeping son. I'll go, she said quietly. He didn't turn. No. They're killing your people. I said no. I'm not worth a war. That's not your decision to make. His voice was flat, final. Clara moved closer, her heart hammering. Then whose decision is it? Yours? You get to decide I'm worth more than men who've served you for years? More than your empire? Your legacy? Yes. He finally looked at her, and Clara saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. That's exactly what I'm deciding. Why? She whispered. Joon-seok looked down at his son. Because Hyun died giving me everything, he said quietly. And you gave my son life when I couldn't. Because in a world built on violence and blood and taking, you offered something freely. He paused. Because maybe I'm tired of being a monster. Clara felt tears burn her eyes. You'll lose everything. I already did. His voice was hollow. The night Hyun died, I lost everything that mattered. The rest is just noise. Before Clara could respond, Minjun burst through the door. Sir, the Park family just moved on 3 of our fronts simultaneously. They're not waiting for the deadline. Joon-seok handed his son to the nanny with gentle precision, his expression shifting from father to something harder, colder. Recall all active units, he said quietly. Burn the secondary accounts. Transfer the clean assets to Hyun's foundation. Minunis asweitend. Sir, that's everything, Joon-seok finished. I know. You're dismantling the organization. I'm choosing what matters. He turned to Clara, and she saw the decision settled in his eyes like stone. Get her to the safe house, he ordered. Don't stop for anything. Don't trust anyone. And if I don't make it back. No, Clara said. I'm not running while you burn your life down for me. Clara. I fed your son, she said fiercely. That made me family, right? Then I'm standing with my family. Silence stretched between them. Then Joon-seok did something unexpected. He smiled, small, sad but real. You're insane, says the man declaring war on the entire Korean underworld. The radio crackled. Boss, they're coming. Multiple vehicles. Armed. ETA 4 minutes. Joon-seok's smile vanished. Then let them come. They came like a storm. 5 vehicles. 20 men. Guns that painted red dots across the compound walls. Clara heard the first gunshot and moved on instinct, running not away from danger, but toward the nursery. Toward the baby. The nanny screamed when Clara burst through the door. Give him to me, Clara ordered, already reaching for the infant. The baby stirred, confused by the sharp movements and distant sounds of violence. Miss, you should. I'm a nurse. Clara's voice was steel. And I'm not leaving him. She ran. Down the hallway. Past windows that shattered as bullets punched through. Past Minjun shouting orders. Past bodyguards taking positions like chess pieces in a game where the stakes were measured in blood. She found Joon-seok in the main hall. He'd shed his jacket. Rolled up his sleeves. There was blood on his shirt. She didn't know if it was his. He held a gun with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been holding them since childhood. When he saw her, saw his son in her arms, something in his face cracked open. I told you to hide. He's safer with me than alone. Another window exploded. Clara dropped to a crouch, her body curving protectively around the baby. Joon-seok moved like violence made flesh, returning fire through the broken glass. Second floor clear, someone shouted in Korean. East wing compromised, another voice reported. They were surrounded. Joon-seok grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her toward the reinforced safe room. Get inside. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. What about you? I'm ending this. His eyes were dark, flat, empty of everything except purpose. Clara recognized that look. She'd seen it in the mirror for 8 months after Marcus died. It was the look of someone with nothing left to lose. The safe room was still and silence. Clara sat on the floor, the baby against her chest, listening to the muffled sounds of war. Gunfire. Shouting. The sickening crack of bodies hitting walls. Time became meaningless. Then silence. The door handle turned. Clara's breath stopped. She'd locked it. Only Joon-seok had the code. The door opened. Joon-seok stood in the frame, breathing hard. More blood now. A cut above his eyebrow. His knuckles raw and split. But alive. It's over, he said quietly. Clara stood on shaking legs. Over how? Come see. She followed him through the compound, through wreckage and broken glass and men groaning on the floor, through violence that would leave scars on this place forever. They found him in the courtyard. Park Jin-ho knelt on the stones, hands zip-tied, surrounded by guns. The man who'd ordered the attack, who'd demanded Clara's death, who'd burned Joon-seok's warehouses and killed his men. Now he knelt like every other man who'd ever underestimated Kang Joon-seok, waiting for execution. Joon-seok raised his gun with mechanical precision. The barrel pressed against Park's temple, cold metal against sweating skin. You came for what's mine, Joon-seok said quietly. So I take what's yours. His finger moved to the trigger. Joon-seok, don't. Clara's voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. He didn't lower the gun. He tried to kill you. I know. He killed my men. I know. Then why? His voice cracked. Why shouldn't he die? Clara stepped closer, the baby still in her arms, sleeping somehow, oblivious to the violence that had swirled around him. Because your son is watching, she said softly. Maybe not now. But someday he'll ask what kind of man his father was. And I want you to be able to tell him the truth. Joon-seok's hand trembled. My world doesn't work like yours. Mercy is weakness. Compassion is liability. Then maybe it's time to leave your world. Clara's eyes held his. You said you were tired of being a monster. Prove it. Silence stretched like a wire pulled taut. Park Jin-ho stared up at them, confusion and terror warring on his face. Then Joon-seok lowered the gun. Get out, he said flatly. Tell them what happened here. Tell them Kang Joon-seok is done. Done. Park's voice cracked. I'm walking away. Joon-seok looked at Clara, at his son. From all of it. The territory. The power. The crown you all want so badly. He dropped the gun at Park's feet. Take it. It's yours. The whole rotten kingdom. Min-jun stepped forward, shock written across his face. Sir, you can't. I can. Joon-seok's voice was final. And I am. He turned to Clara. I made a choice. Empire or humanity. He reached for his son, and Clara placed the baby in his arms carefully. I choose him, Joon-seok said quietly. I choose her. I choose something that doesn't require blood to sustain. Park stared up at him, and slowly understanding dawned. The underworld hadn't killed Kang Joon-seok. It had lost him. To something stronger than fear. Something more powerful than violence. To love. The Korean underworld fractured within 48 hours. Park Jin-ho took Joon-seok's territory like a man inheriting a throne he didn't know how to sit on. The Choi family absorbed the shipping routes. The Kim family claimed the real estate. What Joon-seok had spent a decade building disintegrated in less than a week. He watched it happen from a lawyer's office, signing papers that transferred everything clean into his son's trust fund. Managed by Hyen's Foundation, untouchable by blood money or violence. You could change your mind, Min-jun said quietly. Rebuild. You still have loyalists. Joon-seok looked down at the final document. His signature ended an empire. No, he said. I'm done. What will you do? Learn to be human. Min-jun studied him for a long moment. She must be extraordinary. She is. Joon-seok met his lieutenant's eyes. Take care of them. Whatever's left. Make it mean something. They shook hands. It felt like goodbye. Clara found him on the compound's terrace that night, watching Seoul's lights. Min-jun told me you signed everything away, she said quietly. Yes. You don't have to do this for me. Her voice was careful. I can go back to Atlanta. Disappear. You could. I'm not doing it for you. Clara's breath caught. Joon-seok turned, and she saw something in his face that made her heart stutter. I'm doing it for him, he said. And for Hyen. And for the man I was before I learned that violence was currency. He paused. But if you stay, if you choose to, it would be for us. Not obligation. Not debt. What are you asking me? To build something new. His voice was rough. Far from here. Far from this life. Just 3 people learning how to be a family. Clara felt tears burn her eyes. 8 months ago, she'd buried her son and thought her life as a mother was over. Now a man who'd ruled through fear was asking her to mother his child. Not as a transaction. As a choice. Yes, she whispered. Joon-seok's eyes closed briefly, relief washing over his face like absolution. Yes, he repeated as if afraid he'd misheard. Yes. They left Korea on a Tuesday. No fanfare. No annoncement. Just 3 people boarding a plane to New Zealand with documents that said Joon-seok was a software consultant, and Clara was his partner. The baby slept through takeoff. The cottage was small. Wooden floors. A view of mountains. No bodyguards. No bulletproof glass. No men watching from shadows. Just silence. Joon-seok stood in the kitchen the 3rd morning, staring at the coffee maker like it was a bomb. I don't know how to work this, he admitted. Clara laughed. The first real laugh she'd had in months. You dismantled criminal empires, but you can't make coffee? I had people for that. A smile tugged at his mouth. I had people for everything. Not anymore. No. He looked at her. Not anymore. She showed him. Measured the grounds. Explained the buttons. Their hands brushed, and neither pulled away. Small moments. Learning to be normal. The baby grew. 3 months became 6. 6 became 9. Clara watched Joon-seok transform from a man who held his son like a fragile weapon into someone who sang lullabies in Korean and made airplane sounds during feeding time. She watched herself transform too. The grief didn't disappear. It never would. Marcus would always be the ghost in her chest, the ache that surfaced unexpectedly. But it wasn't drowning anymore. It was memory. Clara returned to nursing part-time at a local clinic. Joon-seok learned to cook, badly, but enthusiastically. They argued about schedules and groceries and whose turn it was to change diapers. They learned to be mundane. And in the mundane, they found something neither had expected. Peace. The baby took his first steps on a Sunday morning in November. Clara was folding laundry. Joon-seok was reading. Actually reading, not scanning reports or analyzing threats. The baby had been pulling himself up on furniture for weeks, testing his legs with determination that reminded Clara painfully of his father. Then he let go. 1 step. 2. 3 wobbly, miraculous steps across the wooden floor before gravity reclaimed him. And he sat down hard, looking surprised. Clara's breath caught. Joon-seok dropped his book, his eyes wide. The baby looked at them, at his father, at the woman who'd fed him when the world was too loud, and smiled. Then he stood again. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. She'd missed this moment with Marcus. Would never have it. But she had this. This child who wasn't hers by birth but was hers by choice. This man who'd walked away from everything to protect something that mattered. This family built from grief and milk and mercy. Joon-seok crossed the room. He knelt beside Clara, taking her hand in his. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch that asked permission, that waited for answer. Thank you, he said quietly. For saving him. For staying. For teaching me that strength isn't always violence. Clara leaned into him. Thank you for choosing us over everything else. The baby took another step. Then another. Learning to walk in a world where his father was no longer a king, but finally completely a father. And Clara, who'd thought her heart had been buried 8 months ago in a plot too small to be real, felt it beat with something that felt almost like joy. Almost like home. 18 months after the plane. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she'd chosen herself. No bulletproof glass. No armed guards. Just light, ordinary and golden, spilling across wooden floors that creaked in familiar places. In the next room, she heard Joon-seok singing softly in Korean, a lullaby his mother had sung to him before she died. Before violence became vocabulary. Before fear became currency. The baby, not a baby anymore, really laughed. Clara smiled into her pillow. She rose slowly, her body warm with sleep, and padded barefoot to the doorway. Joon-seok sat cross-legged on the floor, building block towers for their son to knock down. He wore an old t-shirt and jeans with a hole in the knee. His hair was longer now, unstyled. No watch. No suit. No armor. Just a man playing with his child. He looked up when he sensed her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "What?" she asked softly. "I was just thinking," he said, "about the man I was." Their son knocked over the tower with gleeful destruction. Joon-seok rebuilt it patiently. The man who held empires, who made men disappear with a word, who thought power was the only currency that mattered. He paused, watching his son stack a block crookedly on top of the tower. "I thought I was rich then." Clara moved into the room, sitting beside them. Their son immediately crawled into her lap, babbling something that sounded almost like words. "And now?" she asked quietly. Joon-seok looked at her, really looked. The way he had in the cabin when she'd offered the unthinkable. The way he had when he'd lowered his gun and chosen mercy. The way he had every morning since when he woke up beside someone who'd chosen to stay. "Now I know I had nothing," he said. "Money isn't wealth. Fear isn't power." He reached out, his scarred hand gentle against his son's cheek. "This is wealth. Waking up without wondering who will betray me. Teaching my son words instead of war. Being loved not because people fear me, but because I learned to be human," Clara finished softly. "Yes." That afternoon, Clara visited Marcus's memorial. She'd created one in the cottage's garden. A small cherry tree, Hyan would have approved, with a stone beneath it bearing his name and dates too close together. She knelt in the grass, feeling the sun warm on her shoulders. "I still miss you," she whispered. "Every day, every breath." The wind rustled through the leaves. "But I need you to know something." Her voice cracked. "I'm okay now. Not healed. I don't think that ever really happens. But okay." She pressed her palm against the stone. "I'm loving someone else's child. And it doesn't mean I love you less. It means your love taught me how." The guilt that had lived in her chest for so long, the weight of producing milk for a baby who'd never wake, finally eased. Not disappeared, just eased. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making me a mother. Even if it was only for 6 months. It was enough to teach me what love means." She stood, wiping her eyes. Through the window, she could see Joon-seok lifting their son high, spinning him in circles while the boy shrieked with joy. A father who'd learned that strength was sometimes surrender. A son who would never know his father ruled through fear. A woman who'd fed a stranger's child and found family in the wreckage of grief. Not blood. Not obligation. Choice. That evening, they sat on the porch. Their son slept inside, finally exhausted from a day of discovery. Clara leaned against Joon-seok's shoulder, his arm warm around her. The mountains were purple in the fading light. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. "The power?" "No." The answer was immediate, certain. "I miss who I thought I had to be," he admitted. "But I don't miss the man I was." Clara turned to look at him. "Who are you now?" Joon-seok smiled, small, genuine, earned through 18 months of learning to be normal. "I'm a father," he said. "A partner. A man who makes terrible coffee and can't fold laundry correctly." "You're also kind," Clara added softly. "And brave. And proof that people can change." "So are you." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing overhead. In the distance, their son made a small sound in his sleep. Content, safe, loved by two people who'd found each other in the chaos of a first-class cabin. Where a baby had cried. Where a stranger had offered mercy. Where milk had become bond. And where two people shattered by loss had learned that sometimes love is louder than fear, stronger than power, and richer than any empire built on blood. Joon-seok pulled Clara closer. And for the first time in his life, Kang Joon-seok, who once ruled through fear, ruled nothing at all, and had never been richer.